Meantime, looks like Russia is ready to turn to the Taliban to help in the fight against ISIS. A senior Russian diplomat told local media Moscow has set up the means to communicate with the Taliban, apparently to coordinate efforts to take on the Islamic State. But that diplomat added Russia is also ready to send weapons to the Afghan government. We've seen heavy fighting between Afghan forces and the Taliban recently, as the government tries to take back a key district in the southern part of the country. So just a year after President Obama declared an end to the longest war in American history, is Russia expanding its influence in Afghanistan? William Taylor is a former ambassador to Ukraine, also a special coordinator for Middle East transitions at the State Department. Ambassador Taylor worked in Kabul, Afghanistan, coordinating U.S. and international aid. He's now executive vice president at the U.S. Institute of Peace, which describes itself as a nonpartisan, federally funded group that works to prevent and end violent conflicts around the world. So if Russia is lending a hand in Afghanistan, is this situation only likely to get worse?
It is likely to get worse, John. The Afghan government is battling the Taliban, as you've just reported. The Afghan government has asked for assistance. Certainly they're getting assistance from NATO and the United States. President Ghani has also asked the Russians for weapons. The Russians now are trying to figure out how they can support that, as well as working with the Taliban. The Taliban has had clashes with ISIS, and ISIS does indeed threaten Russia in the North Caucasus. So the Russians are in somewhat of a bind.
But Moscow ordered the invasion of Afghanistan in the late 70s. That didn't go so well for them. Why do they want to put their finger back into that hornet's nest?
That's an excellent question. The invasion of Afghanistan back then that you just described led eventually to the fall of the Soviet Union. So they've got bad memories of Afghanistan, and I will tell you that the Afghans have bad memories of the Russians and the Soviets. So the Russians are looking to see where they can move. They've been stymied in Ukraine, and they're backing off in Ukraine. They're engaged now, maybe bogged down in Syria, and they're looking for other places. But they do have a threat of ISIS on their southern borders.
Well, if they are bogged down in Ukraine and Syria, I would think, getting into a third front war or a third front skirmish, however you want to call it, would not be to Vladimir Putin's advantage.
He's hard to figure. He's very hard. No one can get inside Mr. Putin's head to understand his motivations. The sanctions that the Europeans and the Americans have put on him for invading Ukraine and illegally annexing Crimea are hurting him. And so he may be looking for places to sell some of his equipment.
And they are offering, the Russians are, some equipment to those who are fighting ISIS there.
He's offering that apparently to the Afghan government. I haven't heard that he is offering equipment to the Taliban. Both the Afghan government fighting Taliban and the Taliban fighting ISIS are looking for support.
So by funding and by providing arms to the Afghan government, Russia ingratiates itself and sort of sticks its thumb in the eye of the West at the same time?
It's hard to figure. Again, Mr. Putin would love to stick his finger in the eye of the West. That's one of the motivations, I guess. Again, no one knows really what's going on, but he seems to have done that. But it has not paid off for him. I mean, his economy is now really hurting because of the sanctions and, of course, because of the very low oil prices, which Russia depends on for its economy.
So the Taliban is fighting ISIS in Afghanistan. Russia figures that by aiding the government, which is also fighting ISIS in Afghanistan. What, the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
That must be the calculation, but the government of Afghanistan is really focused on the Taliban. Taliban has the